Grand Theft Auto. Chapter 1 is Surviving the Streets. The wail of police sirens pierced the smoggy night air as I sprinted down a dingy alleyway in the notorious Los Carnales neighborhood of Los Santos. My tattered shoes pounded the cracked concrete as I clutched a stolen wallet tightly to my chest, the badge of a rookie lift to mark my 13th year on this planet. Just another night surviving the mean streets that raised me. Up ahead, the alley intersected with Del Rey Road, one of the main drags for the Carnales gang that controlled this part of the city. I slowed my pace, peeking around the corner to see if the coast was clear. The rhythmic flash of red and blue lights illuminated the alley walls as a squad car raced past the intersection. For now, the cops were heading in the wrong direction. My heist had gone unnoticed. I took a moment to catch my breath and examine my prize. A worn leather billfold, no cash inside, but a few credit cards and a driver's license belonging to one unlucky Rufus T. Eldridge. I pocketed the cards for later use and tossed the empty wallet onto a nearby dumpster before the approaching sirens reminded me it was time to disappear. Darting across Del Rey, I made my way deeper into Carnales territory. Here, every street corner tells a story of violence. Bodies found shot execution style in the streets after late-night confrontations. Makeshift memorials decorated in rosary beads and liquor bottles marking where homies took their last breath. A gang tag scrawled hastily on the wall by a lookout before gunfire interrupted the artwork. Even at 13, I navigate these streets with the instinctive awareness ingrained from a life spent constantly watching my back. Trust no one, avoid eye contact, and keep moving. That's how you survive Los Carnales. Finally, the GT Motel's flickering neon vacancy sign welcomed me home. I crept past the curtain-drawn windows and unlocked the door to room 117. Inside, my little sister Maria was curled up asleep on the ragged sofa that doubled as her bed. Seeing her chest gently rise and fall calmed my rattled nerves. Another night, another close call, but we had made it through. I grabbed a lukewarm beer from the mini fridge and took a long swig. The bitter liquid soothed my parched throat as I counted the meager cash from my wallet theft. $40 and change. Enough for a few more nights in this roach motel and some groceries if we were careful. Tomorrow I'd take Maria by the diner and let her pick out a treat. She deserved at least that much normal for a 12-year-old. A car engine roared outside as a vintage Buick Electra circled the motel parking lot bumping bass-heavy Carnales rap. I crept to the window and peeked out the blinds. Alonso. He oversaw this neighborhood's crews, always recruiting the young ones with promises of cash and new sneakers. Tempting for a hungry kid, but I knew the stakes of Carnales' life. Gangbanging wasn't the future I wanted for myself or Maria. The Buick slowed to a stop outside our room, and Alonso emerged, sauntering over and pounding on our flimsy door. "Frankie, open up, ease, just want to chat." I hesitated. Alonso only came around when he wanted something, but ignoring him risked provoking the Carnales' wrath. I opened the door just wide enough to talk. "Been seeing you boosting on our streets more lately," Alonso said. His voice was casual, but his snake-like eyes watched me closely. "Got skills for a young vato, waste of talent though. Just pocket change you're taking." He put a heavy arm around my shoulder. Carnales could put those skills to real use, steady cash flow, product to move, more than just living day to day like rats in this motel. Think it over. He tapped a gold ring against the door as he turned to leave. "Let me know when you're ready to run with the big dogs." I watched the Buick disappear down the street before locking the door. Alonso's offer churned in my gut. I had avoided the gang life this long, but surviving the streets was getting harder each year. Maybe it was time to use my skills for more than just scoring enough for motel rooms and vodka food. If I could get a real payday, Maria and I could get out of Carnales for good. I glanced at my sleeping sister, her dark curls splayed across the pillow, still innocent to the harsh realities of our world. I would do whatever it took to build her a better future. Chapter 2: The First Crimes as a Teen. 2 months after Alonzo's offer, I was posted up on the corner of Eastbourne and Innocence, deep in Carnales territory. The Bodega wall was cool against my back as I kept lookout, occasionally scanning up and down the block. A new 9mm pistol was tucked in my waistband, stark black against my pale skin. Just holding it made me feel powerful, like I could take on anyone who crossed me. Alonzo said I was moving up in the world now. No more petty boosting and pickpocketing just to survive. Today was my first day slinging dope for the cartel. I checked my pager as it vibrated with a coded message. My client was 5 minutes out. I tugged my ball cap lower and tried to look casual as I watched an Infant Phoenix turn onto Innocence. The muscle car cruised to a stop at the corner and I leaned down to the open passenger window. "You Gustavo?" I asked, using the alias Alonzo had given me. The driver nodded. He looked nervous, his eyes darting around the streets as he reached for a wad of cash. I passed him a small plastic bag of white powder through the window. Our transaction was quick and quiet. As the Phoenix sped off, I exhaled slowly. My first deal done. Just then, a sedan rolled up blasting Carnales rap, the driver flashing Carnales signs with his hands. I tensed, but then recognized Alonzo's signature gold rings. "How'd it go, Frankie?" Alonzo called as I slipped into his passenger seat, recounting the cash for my deal. "Ha, just like that, told you this corner was yours," Alonzo grinned, peeling away from the curb. "Made me proud out here, and there's more where that came from. Might even get you your own wheels soon." I nodded, the hint of his smile creeping across my face. The deal left me jittery, but Alonzo was right. The cash felt good in my pocket. If slinging dope meant Maria and I could finally escape motel life, I would push any doubts aside. I was moving up in Los Carnales now. The next week I stood post up on the same corner, my nerves steeled from the repetition. The 9mm at my back barely registered anymore. I was commuting to the corner each morning, running packages and counting stacks throughout the day, then heading home to Maria at night with a wad of bills for our expenses. We were making enough to rent a small apartment now in one of the high-rise projects. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. Maria could sleep in her own bedroom instead of the motel sofa and even have friends over from school sometimes. Seeing her smile more was all the motivation I needed. I started seeing less of Alonzo as I handled the day-to-day deals independently. He trusted me to hold down Innocence and Eastbourne now. My skills were proving valuable to Santa Blanca. I overheard his lieutenants saying Alonzo planned to bring me fully into the fold soon. My first meeting with the cartel bosses was approaching. I would need to prove my absolute loyalty if I wanted to move up any further. The secrets to surviving Los Carnales: trust no one, avoid eye contact, keep moving, applied more than ever now within the ranks of the cartel. But I was determined to play the game right and build a future for myself and Maria beyond these streets. Chapter 3: Joining Alonzo's Crew. I straightened my new button-down shirt in the rearview mirror of my freshly lifted Sabre Turbo, its cherry red paint gleaming under the streetlights. Tonight was my official initiation into Alonzo's inner circle. I'd been grinding solo for months, learning the ropes of the cartel's operations in Los Carnales. Now it was time to prove myself worthy of joining Alonzo's trusted crew. As I cruised through downtown Vinewood en route to the meetup spot, tourists posed for selfies against the backdrop of the flashy casino fronts and neon-lit stores displaying designer labels most locals could never afford. In this part of the city, it was easy to forget the hardship and poverty rampant just a few miles away in neighborhoods like mine. But that's how Los Santos thrived, a glitz and glamour built on the blood and suffering of those struggling to get by down in the trenches. I pulled into the parking garage of an upscale apartment high-rise. Alonso's slick chrome Dubsta SUV stood out among the rows of Teslas and hybrid SUVs. I parked beside it and headed for the elevator, butterflies churning in my gut. Alonso greeted me as the elevator doors slid open to the penthouse suite. Plush white carpets, floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the cityscape glittering below. So this was how Santa Blanca's top lieutenants lived. "Frankie, good to see you," Alonso grinned, clapping me on the back. He was flanked by two equally stern-looking vatos decked out in designer threads. "This is Javier and Carlos, some of my most loyal soldiers." I shook their hands firmly, holding their stare for a beat before releasing. Alonso led us out to the penthouse balcony, where a table was arranged with bottles of tequila, lines of cocaine, and a handgun. "Have a taste, relax yourself," Alonso said, pouring us shots. "You've proven yourself on those corners, shown you have the brains and balls to move up, but to roll with us requires absolute loyalty, entiendes?" I nodded, throwing back the harsh tequila. My palms were sweaty, but I kept my face stern. "This is an offering of trust between brothers," Alonso continued, motioning to the gun. "We all do a line, then hold the weapon, symbol of watching each other's backs, yes?" He demonstrated, cutting a bump of white powder and inhaling sharply before passing the gun to Javier. I followed suit when the pistol came to me, snorting the bitter cocaine as my heartbeat quickened. I held the cold steel gun in my grip and passed it back to Alonso, maintaining eye contact as I did. He smiled darkly and nodded, seemingly satisfied with my show of loyalty. We continued drinking late into the night, the tequila greasing our conversations about women, money, and the enemies we'd gotten the best of. I'd passed the test. I was now a full member of Alonso's inner circle. As the sun rose over the glitzy high-rises, I felt possibilities opening up. With Alonso's influence and resources, the cartel lifestyle could be my path out of the slums. Over the next few months, I rarely worked corners anymore. Alonso had me running bigger loads across state lines and overseeing group deals in Carnell's territory. The work was more dangerous, but the payouts were fat. Soon I was rolling a sleek pink and black Albany Buccaneer with Lorenzo Lama's vinyls, packing serious heat courtesy of Santa Blanca's gunrunners. Alonso had outfitted his whole crew with new whips to elevate our status. Life was moving fast, but Maria remained my driving force through it all. While I hustled all hours of the day and night, I made sure she stayed focused on school and kept up on rent for our little apartment. As long as Maria had what she needed, I could stomach the risk and violence that came with repping Carnell's colors. Even as my hands got bloodier in service to the cartel, coming home to Maria's smile kept me grounded. But paranoia was brewing within Alonso's crew as our status rose. With more influence came more rivals looking to take us out and take over our territory. I started carrying not just for deals, but 24/7 as hits on cartel members increased. I instructed Maria to keep the blinds drawn and the door locked when I was away. No one could know the apartment had any connection to me. Any slip-up would make my little sister an easy target for vengeance. Trust no one, avoid eye contact, keep moving. The rules of surviving Los Carnels applied more than ever, now that Maria's safety depended on my secrecy. As I lay awake late into the night, gun on the nightstand, I wondered how much longer I could balance the cartel life with keeping my only family left out of harm's way. Chapter 4. Proving loyalty to the cartel. A cold tension hung in the air of the dimly lit warehouse. Alonso's crew stood in a loose circle under the pale flickering glow of a single bulb, watching as Alonso dragged a bruised and bloodied man by his collar into the center. Jose, a low-level dealer who had been skimming product to sell on the side. Alonso released Jose with a rough shove, then turned slowly to address us, his most trusted men. This rat thought he could get over on the cartel, take our supplies to line his own pockets. Alonso sneered down at the cowering Jose. When you sign up to move Santa Blanca's product, your loyalty belongs to us. Betray that trust, there are consequences. Jose pleaded desperately with Alonso, blood bubbling on his swollen lips, groveling something about just needing cash to pay his landlord. Alonso silenced him with a sharp kick to the ribs. Jose whimpered, curling into a ball on the grimy floor. We all work for the cartel first, Alonso said calmly, pacing around Jose's feeble form. Personal profit comes second, yes? He looked pointedly at me and the other men. We all nodded, echoing "see" in hushed tones. Good, Alonso said, removing his pistol slowly from its holster. Then you understand what has to be done with those who forget where their loyalty lies. The cold barrel pressed firmly against Jose's forehead. He squeezed his eyes shut, body trembling violently, as he kept muttering frantic apologies and praying under his breath. Alonso's finger rested on the trigger. The warehouse fell eerily silent, except for the buzzing bulb above. Do it, I said firmly, holding Alonso's stare. If I hesitated here, my own loyalty would be questioned. Any show of weakness could put my status with the cartel at risk. And that risk, Maria's safety in turn. I had to prove my allegiance, no matter how ugly. Alonso maintained eye contact for a beat, then pulled the trigger. The sharp echo of the gunshot faded slowly as blood pooled around what remained of Jose's shattered skull. I kept my face steeled, showing no reaction. The other men shifted uncomfortably and avoided looking directly at the grisly scene on the floor. I stepped forward calmly and put my hand on Alonso's shoulder. You handle betrayal the right way, reminds us all where we stand. I nudged Jose's lifeless body with my shoe. Let the rats know what fate awaits them if they cross Santa Blanca. Alonso's lips curled into an approving grin. He holstered his gun smoothly. Spoken like a true loyalist, glad I have you at my side, hermano. He turned to the others. Clean this up and dump the body where it sends the right message. As we got to the grimwork, I focused only on each task at hand, wrapping the tarp, lifting the dead weight, scrubbing the blood from the concrete. I couldn't afford to think about how Jose's apartment would sit waiting for him. How his abuela might soon wonder why her grandson's visits had stopped. I'd sealed my place as Alonso's right hand by ending Jose's life. This was the price of Maria's security within the cartel's fold. There was no turning back now. In the months that followed, I got used to the killings. Loyalty tests, rat punishments, turf war clashes, the violence became numb routine. If Alonso decided someone's time was up, I never questioned it. My only job was making sure the cartel's will was enforced on the streets. I tried not to dwell on the faces of those whose lives I ended. I told myself it was all part of the life I had chosen to ensure Maria and I survived Los Carnales. But truth was, part of me was starting to embrace the power that came with dropping bodies for the cartel. The fear in my enemies' eyes when my gun was trained on them made me feel invincible, like all my years struggling to survive this harsh city had led to me finally seizing control. Maybe deep down, I knew each kill was twisting my soul into something unrecognizable. But I was in too deep with Santa Blanca to tap out now. The streets had made me cold and ruthless. When I looked in the mirror, I no longer saw the scrawny kid in worn-out sneakers lifting wallets, just to feed his little sister. Now I saw a steely-eyed killer who commanded respect, draped in gold chains and cruising the streets in a slick lowrider. Maria never asked questions when I came home late reeking of blood and gunpowder. But I saw how she averted her eyes from the pistol on my waistband, how she winced at sudden noises like my knocks at the door. She was old enough now to understand her big brother was not one of the good guys. All I could do was keep my work far from her doorstep, maintain our distance from the evils of the cartel. I was indebted to Santa Blanca, but Maria's innocence belonged to me alone. I had to find a way to reconcile the increasing contradiction between my two worlds, before it tore me apart. Chapter 5: First Drug Deals. I rolled up my sleeves, staring at the faint needle marks on my forearms as I prepped another dose of the sweet candy. The product I once only handled as part of the business was now a daily habit. At first, it kept me sharp, energized during marathon workdays of slinging dope and pulling triggers for the cartel. But lately more of my supply went straight into my own veins instead of my customers' hands. I didn't trip off it though. So long as I kept the cash and product flowing on my corners, Alonzo didn't care what I consumed on the side. Anyway, the rush of the horse took the edge off the bloodshed, made it easier to shut my mind off from reminiscing on jobs gone sour or ghosts that haunted me from my stacks of bodies. High on that candy, I could be an icy killer without hesitation or regret. The nights I spent wide awake, still seeing the faces in my nightmares, became less frequent. In the end, whatever it took to get by was justified. Tonight I was posted up outside the bustling 24/7 store on Innocence BLVD, the intersection teeming with late-night traffic and pedestrians. Word was out that I was holding weight, and buyers steadily approached my lurking spot by the shuttered storefronts to score balloons of that sweet white. Slinging on the corner solo was riskier, but Alonzo had bigger deals going down I wasn't privy to lately. I flipped through the wad of bills after my last sale, counting quietly. Nearly $2,000 so far, and the night was still young. The cartel had me taxing extra since some bad blood with the marabuntas had been cutting into profits on this block. Santa Blanca wanted the lost cash recouped, one way or another. Next customer up approached wearing an oversized hoodie with the hood cinched tight, despite the mild weather. I nodded as he requested a half-dozen balloons. His hands shook nervously as he counted out the crumpled bills. I made the exchange quickly, eyeing the heavy tear-drop tats under his bloodshot eyes. Dude was already zooted and seemed on edge. As he turned to leave, I noticed a conspicuous bulge at his waistband under the baggy sweatshirt. My hand instinctively reached for the heat tucked under my own shirt if things went south. Sure enough, he spun back around swiftly, drawing a pistol and aiming it at my head with a shaky grip. "Give me everything else, Chagat fool," he spat, panic creeping into his voice. His eyes kept darting around the street for witnesses. I put my hands up slowly, buying time to assess the situation. "Easy now, man. You don't need to do this," I said calmly. My piece was still nestled at the small of my back. I'd have to play this smooth if it came to drawing on him. "I ain't playing Vato, run that stash now." His words ran together, the gun trembling in his clammy hands. Likely some junkie looking to rob me for his next fix, too tweaked out to think straight. If I moved slow, his sloppy nerves might make him slip up before I had to blast him in the open street. I reached my left hand back slowly like I was going for my wallet, watching his eyes track my movement. As his gaze followed my hand downward, I lunged forward instead with my right, swatting his shaky gun arm away. The pistol discharged wildly into the pavement as we struggled. I finally pried it loose and pistol whipped him hard upside the head. He staggered backward, dazed but still on his feet. I aimed his own gun back at him now, clicking the safety off. "Not so tough now, huh, cabron?" I glared at him down the iron sights. His hood had slipped off, exposing greasy hair slick with blood from the gash on his temple. Please, I'm sorry, man, I'm so sorry, he stammered, arms raised in surrender. His bravado had evaporated now that the shoe was on the other foot. I need a fix bad, didn't mean for this. My finger rested on the trigger as I contemplated his fate. Had it been a rival gangbanger trying to rob me or muscle in on my turf, he'd already be laid out on the pavement. But this was just some pathetic junkie too desperate and strung out to know better. Killing him over an amateur stick-up didn't serve Santa Blanca. Might even attract unnecessary heat if witnesses had seen the commotion. Get the fuck out of Carnales before sunrise, I ordered sternly, lowering the gun. And say a prayer tonight you didn't make me take your life, now move. He didn't need telling twice, taking off in a stumbling run down the block without looking back. I watched until he disappeared into the night, then tucked his stolen gun in my waistband next to mine. Hopefully letting him walk would not come back to haunt me if he got caught blabbing about the confrontation. For now I just needed to finish slinging this product and get my ass home. As I drove back from Innocence, my engine roared loudly to drown out the phantom sound of the misfired bullet still ringing in my ears. My hands gripped the wheel tight, my bruised knuckles pulsating. I couldn't afford slip-ups dealing with junkies and stick-up punks out here alone. But taking on small fry wasn't my job anymore. Alonzo said he had plans for me, big moves that would put me on the fast track with the cartel. Yet lately he kept me grinding on street-level shit, always vague about the details of his inner circle's business. Paranoia crept over me that he was testing my loyalty, keeping me on a need-to-know basis until I proved myself again. But how much further did I need to go to be truly made in Santa Blanca's eyes? For now, I pushed my doubts aside as I parked outside the towering project complex. Maria waited upstairs, oblivious to the violence that almost found me tonight. Seeing her smile again would ground me, remind me why I endured this life day after damn day. As long as my secret stayed buried, her future remained bright. I could play Alonzo's game, be the ruthless killer he required. Anything to keep my little sister from learning what darkness now lurked in her brother's heart. Chapter 6: Family Distress. I crept through the unlit stairwell of our apartment building, stepping over toppled liquor bottles and other trash strewn on the filthy steps. It was past 3 a.m., but sleep rarely came easy these nights. Another brutal day of cartel business had my mind racing too fast for rest. And more, part of me dreaded coming back to the dismal little apartment that was supposed to be our haven. Unlocking the front door, I found Maria curled up asleep on the couch, clutching her worn-out stuffed bear, still in her school clothes. She had tried waiting up for me again. I sighed, gently laying a blanket over her small frame before heading to the fridge for a beer. These days, Maria felt more like a ghost than the bubbly kid sister I remembered. Sullen and withdrawn at school, according to her teachers, refusing to let friends come over anymore because she was ashamed of our dingy housing. She barely spoke without prompting, often staring off vacantly into space, flinching when doors slammed or cars backfired outside. I knew the life I'd dragged us into was changing her, scarring her innocence. But the money and status kept me loyal to the cartel. I told myself it was all for her benefit in the end, even as the bright young girl I had practically raised rapidly faded from sight. I sank onto our lumpy mattress, staring up at the water-stained ceiling, listening to sirens wailing nearby. This apartment was supposed to lift us out of motel captivity, provide Maria a real home. But lately it felt more like a prison, masking my failure to build a stable life outside the chaos of Carnales. Between school and my work, Maria and I barely even saw each other now. Our worlds were drifting apart day by day, even while we lived under the same crumbling roof. Suddenly, the relative stillness was broken by shouting outside our unit, then glass shattering. Maria jolted awake with a small scream as the front window of our apartment exploded inward. I dove to shield her from the rain of glass as angry shouts continued outside. Peeking through the shattered window, I glimpsed two vatos fleeing down the stairwell, one of them clutching a brick they had chucked through our window. Maria trembled against me, crying quietly. I stroked her hair, murmuring soothing words while my blood boiled. This had retaliation written all over it, likely the marabuntas paying us back for the product skimmed from their territory lately. They knew to strike at family of Santa Blanca members to send a message. I called Alonzo as I swept up broken glass, struggling to keep my tone even. Someone threw a brick through my window, likely the fucking rats from Marabunta. Should I hit back? Alonzo was silent before responding. Stand down for now, I got plans in motion to address them already. He was deflecting again, hiding his true motives from me. Just focus on your sister, family first. The call left me uneasy as I boarded up the shattered window with scrap wood. Alonzo's secrets were compromising security of my own family now. If I couldn't trust him to have my back, Maria would never be safe with the cartel. Action needed to be taken, even if it meant going above Alonzo's head. I had my own plans to set in motion. The next night I left Maria with a neighbor I trusted and drove to a sprawling ranch house on the outskirts of the city. The home of Juan Carlos, one of the cartel's top cocaine producers that Alonzo answered to. If anyone could authorize a direct hit back on the marabuntas for coming after my home, it was Juan Carlos. As I sat waiting in the plush leather chairs of his study, the walls adorned with mounted lion heads and other hunting trophies, Juan Carlos regarded me curiously. Despite his refined digs, his pock-marked face and cold stare betrayed his own violent rise within Santa Blanca. So Alonzo's newest prospect pays me a visit, eh? How can I help my friend? I chose my words carefully, not wanting to disrespect Alonzo, but make clear I expected swift retaliation. After the trouble lately with our competitors, I need to be sure my family is protected. The marabuntas attacked my home last night. I worry Alonzo is too reactive right now after other losses. Juan Carlos nodded thoughtfully. Yes, we have had some setbacks lately. Alonzo tries to shield the details from his men, but problems need solutions. He walked over to a polished bar cart and poured 2 glasses of brandy. Loyalty and discretion will be rewarded, Mr. West, Frank West. I accepted the glass, making steady eye contact. Mr. West, a pleasure. Juan Carlos raised his glass. I see potential in you. Stay close to Alonzo for now, but know I am watching with interest your rise within the organization. Family should always come first within the cartel. We will see your loyalty repaid. I left feeling emboldened. Alonzo was now on notice, both from above and below. Any more vulnerability showed, and I would push for his removal. The marabuntas would soon face the wrath they deserved for targeting my sister. With Juan Carlos' blessing, I finally had the influence within Santa Blanca to secure Maria's future. Alonzo just needed to stay out of my way. Chapter 7: Maria's Death. I paced the hospital waiting room, my stomach churning with dread. Maria had been caught in the crossfire of a drive-by shooting, the latest clash between the cartels and their rivals. After years of keeping my little sister far from my criminal dealings, in one moment of violence, her innocent life now hung in the balance. The minutes crawled by, the clocks ticking thunderous in the sterile silence. I replayed it all helplessly in my head, Maria walking home from school, me intercepting an odd text on Alonzo's phone, rushing back just in time to see her small frame riddled with bullets on the sidewalk. Her blood had soaked through my shirt as I begged her to keep breathing, her dark eyes wide with confusion and fear in what might have been her final moments. This was the cost of my ruthless rise in Los Carnales. I had enemies on all sides now. My own sister was paying the price. After what felt like an eternity, the doctor finally emerged. One glance at his grim expression told me everything I needed to know. "I'm so sorry, we did everything we could, but her injuries were too severe. Your sister has passed." His voice sounded miles away, barely registering through the ringing in my ears. I choked back, bile rising in my throat, gripping the wall for support. This couldn't be real. Maria couldn't be gone. The little girl I had sworn to protect, whose smile alone had kept me tethered to my withering humanity. Extinguished in seconds by the very violence I inflicted daily in the cartel's name. I shoved past the doctor and burst through the swinging doors into Maria's room. There she lay, still and cold on the blood-soaked sheets. Dark curls splayed like a halo around her pale face. I crumpled beside her, clutching her hand that would never hold mine again. "I'm so sorry, baby girl. I'm so fucking sorry." I repeated it over and over like a pleading mantra, hot tears spilling down my face. But no apology could absolve me now. My precious sister was lost forever, paying the price for her brother's blackened soul. They had taken from me the one innocent light left in my grim world. Grief slowly curdled to rage. Someone would pay for this with blood. The Marabuntas would soon face my wrath for taking Maria from me. Alonso had held me back from retaliation long enough. And Juan Carlos would give his blessing to the warpath I was ready to pave. I kissed Maria's cold forehead one last time in farewell. When I left this hospital, the big brother she once knew would stay a ghost with her. Only the ruthless cartel enforcer would remain, fueled solely by vengeance. The killers took my humanity when they took my sister. Now I would make Los Carnales run red until their whole fucking crew was wiped out. Chapter 8. Of planning his exit. Weeks had passed since I lost Maria, each day blurring lifelessly into the next. When I wasn't carrying out executions on the Marabuntas, I was zonked out of my mind on candy and tequila just to numb the grief and rage. My killings had become even more sadistic since Maria's murder. I took my time with targets now, finding new ways to savor their pain before finally ending it. Fear was my only remaining high. But the bloody haze of vengeance couldn't sustain me much longer. Juan Carlos was growing concerned by my increasingly erratic behavior. And rumors had begun swirling that Alonso no longer fully trusted me after I defied his orders and took revenge on my own terms. If I didn't get my shit together, my days with the cartel were numbered. But leaving the life outright would make me a marked man. Alonso and his cronies would never let me walk away freely after all I had done. I was trapped, forced to keep playing the role of the cartel's icy enforcer when it had cost me my very humanity. After another late night of working through those bleak thoughts with the help of nose candy and nicotine, I finally drifted off as the sun rose over the city. My sleep offered no escape, my dreaming mind haunted by the ghosts of Carnale's past. Maria's face appeared first, shaking her head, her eyes pleading, "How could you let this happen to me?" My victims emerged next, bloody and broken, clawing at me with accusations. "You took me from my family, just like they took your sister." I jolted awake, drenched in cold sweat, their phantom screams still ringing in my ears. I couldn't live like this any longer, tormented by the dead while pretending nothing at all affected me. If getting out from under the cartel's thumb was impossible, I'd have to fake my demise and disappear completely off their radar. Over the next week, I discreetly prepped my exit strategy between carrying out hits. I rented a small safe house apartment under an alias across town that I could disappear to once my death was staged. Through one of Juan Carlos' gun-running contacts, I secured a convincing cadaver to pass off as my body once recovered. And I drained as much cash as I could from my bank accounts without raising suspicion to fund my upcoming disappearance. Finally, the night came to put my plan in motion. I waited until Alonzo's crew was preoccupied with a deal uptown to discreetly slip away from our meetup spot after saying I needed to make a liquor run. Once I was clear of their location, I hotwired an old beater car off the street so it couldn't be traced back to me later. I drove the Junker to the outskirts of Los Santos, parking near a cliffside overlook above the churning river. The strong current would quickly carry my lifeless body downstream. Giving the car one last check, I said a solemn goodbye under my breath to the hardened gangster I had let myself become. It was time for Frank West to disappear for good. I cracked the driver's side window and jammed the gas pedal down with a brick, sending the vehicle lurching driverless over the cliff. It crashed into the rocks below and was quickly swallowed up by the swirling dark water. Tomorrow, when it surfaced, the cadaver inside, dressed in my clothes, would be identified as my remains. As I watched the car sink below the moonlit waves, I finally felt free of the blood-stained burden I had carried all these years. The cartel would mourn Frank West and move on, never knowing their loyal enforcer had tricked them all. Only a ghost remained now, a shell of a man, aimless with no family left to fight for. But at least no one hunting me could ever again leverage the ones I loved against me. Maria would forever be my last innocent tie to this world. Chapter 9. Stealing from the Cartel. A light rain fell as I slipped through the shadows behind the warehouse where Alonzo's crew stored their product and cash. No guards stood watch. With Frank West declared dead earlier this week, security had gotten lazy. Tonight that carelessness would fund the next chapter of my new life. I jimmied open a side door and scanned the space quickly. Bricks of white powder packaged for distribution. Stacks of bills rubber banded together, hundreds of thousands in cartel cash. I moved swiftly but quietly, grabbing everything I could haul in 2 duffel bags while keeping an ear out for company. In and out before anyone was the wiser. Lugging the payload to my beater getaway car, I felt a rush at ripping off the men I had once loyally served. Let them take the loss as punishment for their ruthlessness taking my sister from me. This was only the first wound. Now that I moved amongst them invisibly, the cartel would pay for all they had done. But retribution would have to wait. Tonight, securing my own escape took priority. I ditched the stolen car a few miles away and hauled the bags onto a bus out of the city, wary of being followed. Only once I reached the safe house across town did I finally relax, counting the take for my heist. Almost a $250,000 now at my disposal to start over somewhere far from Los Santos. The cash would also buy the leverage I needed to keep the cartel from sniffing out I was still alive. I reached out to an old contact I occasionally use for intel, the owner of the city's largest cab company, known only as the Mystery Man. His network of eyes and ears across Los Santos was unparalleled, and his discretion came cheap to those who paid. We met at one of his smaller dispatch offices downtown, his face obscured under a ball cap and behind a cloud of cigarette smoke. I pushed an envelope of cash across the table. I need dirt to bring down the cartel's leaders, Alonzo, Juan Carlos, all the top players, and I need them to believe I'm dead in the process. He eyed the money contemptuously. Quite the tall order, ratting out the cartel as a quick ticket to the more. I tossed 2 more envelopes his direction. Then make sure any leaks can't trace back to me. I'll make it worth you while each month I stay a ghost deal. He pondered silently, then nodded. We have an arrangement, but patience will be required on your end. Rocking the cartel's empire from the outside takes time. He extended his hand to shake mine firmly. I left the office emboldened. The Mystery Man's intel would be my lifeline now. With enough dirt, I could not only take down Los Carnel's top brass, but ensure anyone who came looking for Frank West met a dead end. For Maria's sake, her brother needed to stay buried forever. In the months that followed, I kept busy establishing my new identity in a small rural town across the state border while awaiting progress from the mystery man. I leased a rundown little cottage, got a basic prepaid cell phone, and found cash gigs doing manual labor that kept me under the radar. To any locals I encountered, I was just a working-class drifter passing through. Meanwhile, funds trickled back to the mystery man each month, though concrete intel remained scarce. He assured me patience was still required. With Alonzo's stature rising lately, the time was coming soon to strategically leak information that would implicate him in cartel losses and cast doubt on his loyalty. I'd set things in motion. Now I just needed to bite my tongue and bide my time while observing my old comrades from the shadows, waiting to strike. Chapter 10: Assassins Chasing Frank. The midday sun beat down as I chopped firewood behind my small cottage, working up a heavy sweat. Rural life had proven a monotonous adjustment from the non-stop chaos of Los Carnales. My only steady company out here was an old hound dog named Waylon, who slept his days away on my front porch. But the boredom was a fair price for security far from cartel drama, as I laid plans for revenge. From the mystery man's reports, paranoia was spreading within Santa Blanca's ranks. My tomb raiding had put a major financial dent in their operations. And with me supposedly dead, suspicion was falling on those who had been closest to me, Alonzo above all. The mystery man just needed to apply more pressure at the fragile seams before their empire unraveled. I was so close now to watching it all crash down around them. As I hauled another log over to split, a shiny black sedan with tinted windows creeping down my dusty road caught my eye. It was the first unfamiliar car I had seen out here. I rested my hand casually on the pistol tucked into my jeans, watching the vehicle approach from the tree line. It slowed to a stop a few yards from my porch, engine idling. The back door opened, and two men stepped out, both dressed in loose-fitting suits that poorly concealed their strapped sidearms. Cartel assassins. My gut lurched. Somehow I had been made. Keeping my face stoic, I firmly gripped the axe handle and steeled my nerves as the pair strode over. The taller assassin spoke first. "Center West, you are a hard man to find." His voice was smooth but cold. "Our associates would like a word about your recent activities. If you come willingly, your death will be swift." I tightened my grip on my hidden weapon. "Sorry, fellas, I'm retired. Not the man you're looking for." I peered steadily into their hollow eyes, bracing for the violence to erupt. The talker chuckled. "Please, drop the charade. Did you think we would not uncover your deception? Come quietly, and we will ensure the rest of your days are comfortable." His thin lips curled into a sadistic smile. In a flash, I drew my gun and fired, catching him in the neck before he could reach for his own weapon. As he collapsed gurgling, I dove behind the woodpile, just as his partner's bullets peppered the spot where I had stood. Breathing hard, I weighed my options quickly. I was badly outgunned, but I knew these back roads and forests. My only chance was losing them on rugged terrain. As my attacker reloaded, I broke from cover and sprinted for the tree line, zig-zagging in case he gave chase. Reaching the woods, I slipped between the pines silently, the scent of sap and wet earth filling my lungs. The assassin's shouts faded as I raced deeper into the forest, vaulting fallen logs and circling back on my own tracks to throw them off. After an hour of breathless running, I finally paused, bracing my hands on my knees. No sounds of pursuit, for now I had managed to slip their grasp. But it was only a matter of time until Santa Blanca sent more men now that I had been made. Much as it pained me, I had to abandon the rural hideout I had just started to make a home. As darkness fell, I made my way cautiously back to the cottage to grab the go-bag and weaponry I had stashed for situations just like this. Before leaving for good, I took one last look at the humble place that had been my refuge, however briefly. I scratched Waylon behind the ears where he lay on the porch, wishing I could bring him along to my next unknown destination. "Sorry, boy, you're on your own now." I climbed into a pickup truck parked down the road, keeping an eye out for the assassin's sedan as I pulled away. In the rearview mirror, my little cottage faded into the night, the lone light on the porch glowing like a beacon in the wilderness. Once again I was the hunted, my enemies relentless. But at least now I knew Alonso's impenetrable armor had a weak spot that could bring him crashing down. I just needed to strike it before the cartel's vengeance found me again. Chapter 11. Shootouts in Los Santos. Tires screeched around the corner as I weaved the stolen sedan through the narrow alleys of Los Santos, my pulse racing. Ever since the assassins had found me upstate, I knew my next play had to be bold to get the cartel off my scent. I was going to hit Alonso's crew in their own backyard to send a message. Their enemies were everywhere, even right under their noses. Checking the mirror, I glimpsed the chrome grille of Alonso's dubsta gaining on me. His boys must have spotted me lurking near their warehouse hangout and given chase. I just needed to lure them somewhere I had the advantage. Up ahead, a side alley forked off towards Delray Road, one of the main drags through Carnell's territory. I took the turn sharply, fishtailing onto Delray where I knew a rival gang controlled the block. As I hoped, two armed young vatos stood posted up outside the laundromat on the corner. I slowed the sedan as I passed them and shouted out the open window. "Alonso's crew is coming around the corner. Lit their asses up." Before they could react, I hit the gas, rounding the next corner as Alonso's SUV skidded onto Delray. The sounds of shouts and gunfire erupted behind me. If the rivals didn't take down Alonso's boys, they would at least slow them down. I ditched the stolen car a few blocks away and slipped unseen through side streets on foot. The afternoon crowds choking the sidewalks paid me little mind, too caught up hustling to their own business. In my street clothes, I was just another face blending into the Los Santos sprawl. As I peered out from an alley, a familiar pink and black Buick Electra cruising by made my breath catch in my throat. Alonso himself driving solo, likely out searching for the sedan I had abandoned. I reached for the pistol tucked in my waistband. This was my chance to take him down face to face. Stepping into the street as the Buick approached, I raised my weapon at its tinted windows. People on the sidewalk screamed, scrambling for cover as I unloaded round after round into the driver's side. The Buick swerved and collided with a parked vehicle, the windows shattered and smoke spewing from the riddled chassis. Alonso had to be dead or dying inside. I moved in cautiously for the execution shot. Suddenly, burning pain exploded across my left shoulder, and I crumpled to the asphalt. One of Alonso's henchmen behind me had landed a shot. Out of instinct, I squeezed off 2 quick rounds in his direction, not waiting to see if they met their mark before I scrambled behind a dumpster. I clutched my gushing wound to slow the bleeding, cursing through gritted teeth. The Buick's driver door hung open now. Alonso must have bailed once the bullets started flying. I'd failed to take him down. Sirens wailed in the distance, closing in fast. With my injury, taking on the cops head-on would be suicide. The alley offered my only route of escape. Their shouting voices faded into the distance as I limped into a maintenance shed and collapsed behind piles of equipment and gardening tools. For now I was clear, but wounded badly. As I tore my shirt to bandage the oozing shoulder hole, my head spun with defeat. I had risked it all to put Alonso in the dirt, but he had slipped the noose again while his men nearly put me in my own grave. Even with the element of surprise, taking down the cartel from the inside was proving nearly impossible. I needed further outside help if I wanted to end this war on my terms. Wincing through searing pain, I wrapped up my shoulder as best I could manage and lumbered back to my beater car waiting a few blocks over. As I drove off, I replayed the botched confrontation in my mind. What if I had fired on Alonso seconds earlier, or been a better shot to his henchman that blindsided me? Wondering about the what-ifs would torture me, but I had to shake it off. The time for risky direct assaults was over. Now I needed the mystery man's web to deliver my vengeance quietly and cleverly. With him as my invisible partner, we would topple Alonso's empire without him ever seeing the betrayal coming or knowing who ultimately pulled the trigger. Chapter 12. High-stakes car racing getaway. Engine roaring, I tore down the rural highway weaving between trucks, the scent of burnt rubber trailing behind me. One hand on the wheel, the other putting pressure on the makeshift bandage covering my shoulder wound from the Carnals shootout yesterday. The gauze was soaked through with blood. I needed to find somewhere secure to lay low and get this hole properly patched up. Up ahead, flashing cherries appeared in my rearview mirror. A highway patrol cruiser was gaining on me. I couldn't risk getting cornered alone out here by the law. Flopping sweaty hair from my eyes, I slammed the pedal down harder, speedometer pushing past 110. The cop followed suit, siren wailing. My mind raced for options as mile markers flew past in a blur. Suddenly an off-ramp appeared for the town of Paleto Bay. It was my best shot to lose the heat. I cranked the wheel sharply, tires screaming as I veered onto the exit. The ramp circled into a long downhill straightaway. Perfect for making my move. I unlatched the rusty door, the wind whipping at my clothes as I positioned myself. The cruiser was close on my tail now, as the road leveled out at the bottom of the ramp. With one hand I grabbed the steering wheel and shoved my foot all the way down on the gas pedal, pressing my weight onto it. As the speedometer rocketed past 120, I flung myself sideways out the open door, bracing for impact. I hit the pavement hard, rolling to soften the blow as the driverless car accelerated out of control ahead of me. The cruiser swerved, but couldn't stop in time, colliding nose first with the back of my decoy ride in a burning crunch of metal on metal. My shoulder seared with fresh pain as I pulled myself up, limping to assess the wreck. The mangled cruiser was embedded into the twisted rear bumper of my former vehicle, the entire front end crushed inward. Drops of my blood splattered the street where I had rolled clear of the crash. No movement inside the cruiser. The officer was likely unconscious if he had survived at all. I had only seconds to disappear from the scene. Moving as quick as my screaming muscles would allow, I slipped behind the rows of small businesses lining the street just as distant sirens approached. Ducking behind the auto body shop, I scanned for anything that could get me mobile again fast. A pair of legs stuck out from under a raised sedan on the hydraulic lift inside the open garage. Keys dangling from the ignition of a parked tow truck nearby. That was my ride out. I limped closer silently, drawing the pistol from my jeans. I hated to carjack an innocent mechanic, but getting nabbed here in my condition would be a death sentence. As I neared the truck, the mechanic slid out from underneath the hoisted sedan, freezing in surprise at the sight of me. I raised the gun apologetically. "Sorry, man, I need your truck, nothing personal." Keeping the gun aimed with my dominant hand, I used my left to toss him the pile of crumpled bills from my pocket. "For your troubles." Before he could react, I hopped in the truck cab and peeled out of the garage, rounding the building back towards the highway. In the rear view, I glimpsed him standing there clutching the cash, still too stunned to give chase. At least I hadn't left him entirely high and dry. I dumped the stolen tow truck a mile down the freeway, far from where the cops would still be swarming. As I trudged along the dusty shoulder, my threadbare shirt was soaked through with sweat and blood. The rush of adrenaline was the only thing keeping me on my feet. I needed to find somewhere to lay low fast before my wounds took me down. Up ahead, a lone billboard rose over the plains. Algonquin Lodge, vacancies. I exhaled with relief. Just the kind of rundown, no questions asked motel I could disappear into while patching myself up. As I limped towards its flickering neon beacon, I replayed the wild police chase in my head. I was lucky to escape at all with these injuries slowing me down. But provoking the cops had been a necessary risk with the cartel forces closing in. Sometimes you had to drive full speed into the chaos to get away clean. Chapter 13. Cliffside Crash Escape. Sunlight filtered through moth-eaten curtains as I slowly came to, lying on a musty bed in the cramped motel room. My shoulder throbbed where I had stitched up the gunshot wound the night before. The TV drone of a daytime talk show told me I had slept through the morning. Hopefully by now the heat from yesterday's chase had cooled off. I limped to the sink, splashing cold water on my face to shake off lingering grogginess, before examining myself in the speckled mirror. Besides the bandaged shoulder, lacerations and bruises covered my torso from rolling clear of the crash. Close call, but once again I had escaped the cartel's grasp. As long as I kept one step ahead, I still controlled this game. After changing the dressing on my slowly healing bullet hole, I gathered my things to vacate the motel before I overstayed my welcome. Time to put some more miles between me and yesterday's wreck site. I stepped cautiously from the room, scanning the mostly empty parking lot before making my way to a pickup truck that would suit my purposes. I'd gotten the engine turned over and was easing towards the lot exit when a black SUV came barreling in, screeching to a halt diagonally to block the drive. The doors flew open as 3 men with handguns hopped out, taking aim at my truck. Cartel assassins. Somehow they had tracked me to this spot. Thinking fast, I threw the pickup into reverse and punched the gas, crashing through a low fence beside the lot to escape onto the open plains. My shoulder screamed in protest as I struggled to control the lurching truck across the rough terrain. The SUV pursued close behind, its heavy chassis unhindered by the rough ground. I swerved sharply as the assassins leaned out their windows firing rounds that peppered the dirt clouds around me. Up ahead, I spotted a lone farmhouse, likely my only chance to lose them out here. I swung the truck around, using the building as a shield to block their view as I jumped down and slipped through the unlocked door. Inside, an elderly farmer stared in confusion as I raced past him. "Sorry, just passing through," I called over my shoulder, bursting out the rear entrance. The SUV had stopped its pursuit, the assassins now on foot scoping the property looking for where I disappeared. I crept around the far side of the barn, scanning the surroundings frantically. A small riding mower gave me a desperate idea. I ripped off my shirt and jammed it into the mower's muffler before firing up the puttering engine. While the modified mower spewed smoke, I sprinted to where the black SUV idled by the farmhouse. My shoulder shrieked, but I pushed through the pain as I floored the SUV towards the main road, dust billowing behind me. The assassins turned at the sound of their own engine roaring to life. Through the back window I glimpsed their figures receding, unable to give chase now as I sped off in their stranded vehicle. For the moment, I was free once again. I drove the hijacked SUV hard until I reached the coastline, weaving through seaside villages and summer tourist traffic. The crashing waves to my right were a welcome reprieve from the chaos of recent days. After the non-stop shootouts and car chases, I needed time to breathe, get my head straight and wounds healed before going another round with the cartel and their hunters. Up ahead, a vacant clifftop overlook provided the perfect discreet spot to ditch the stolen vehicle. I left the SUV teetering at the cliff edge, driver's door wide open. With luck, it would be found crashed and ablaze at the bottom by morning, evidence pointing to me having gone down with the ship. Under the pier below, I found a small dinghy tied up that I could safely disappear on now that I was supposedly a drowned man once again. As I drifted out onto the open sea, the salty wind stinging my skin, I took a long, deep breath. The cartel had tasted blood, almost finishing their wounded prey. I couldn't afford any more close calls. It was time to stop reacting and take back control. My next move needed to land a decisive blow while I still had the element of surprise. I would reach out to the mystery man and set our endgame in motion, an explosive finale to my bloody cartel chapter. Out here alone on the waves, the egos who had taken everything from me seemed insignificant. But soon their empires would come crashing down. By my hand, justice would finally be served. Chapter 14. A Faking Death with the River Plunge. Twilight cast an eerie glow across the rippling water as I gazed out over the bridge railing. Far below, the Los Santos River churned steadily past downtown's glitzy facade, coursing to the vast ocean beyond the city limits. Out there somewhere, my father's ashes had been scattered when I was just a boy. Now these swirling waters would carry the remains of his only son to a similar unknown resting place. I had come full circle, back to the city that forged me, took everything and everyone I cared for, leaving a hardened outlaw in the kid's stead. But after all the blood I had spilled here, it was time for Frank West to disappear forever. Once I plunged into that cold abyss, the cartel's ruthless dog of war would simply be another ghost who had tried cheating the inevitable cost of violence. My shoulder had mostly healed, leaving a knotted scar, a parting gift from my former brothers. The rest of my wounds over the years ran deeper than flesh, the invisible scars across my soul that would never fade even in death. Those I had to carry to the grave. The curse of invincibility until the very end. In the end, all that kept me clinging to this world was the chance to take away everything from those who took Maria's pure life. I'd set the mystery man's machinations in motion weeks ago, eliminating loose ends within the cartel's networks, seeding evidence and tips to tighten the noose unseen. Now I had to see this through to the finish, until the whole bloody apparatus came crashing down. I mounted the bridge railing, peering down at the hypnotic movement of shadowy water as my thoughts drifted to Maria. If any peace existed beyond this brutal life, I prayed my baby sister had found it, far from the demons who took her. Maybe she would be the one welcoming me into whatever came next when I let the water embrace me. No reason left to fight the current's inevitable pull. Headlights appeared, slowing as a black town car approached my perch. I gave the mystery man waiting inside a simple nod. He had upheld his end, helped me set the trap that would decimate the cartel. Now he would be witness as I said farewell to the wretched past, severing my final tie to this world. Without looking back, I tipped forward, wind rushing in my ears for a few brief seconds before the cold slapped every limb stiff. Surfacing in choking gasps, I glimpsed the bridge receding as the swirling current gripped me tightly, carrying my battered body gently but inexorably towards the black horizon. The boy who once prayed nightly for angels' protection had become the man even devils now feared. Until the rushing waters swallowed him whole, leaving only a ghost in his wake. Chapter 15. Adopting a New Identity. Next customer. The bureaucratic bark jolted me from reminiscing as I stepped up to the DMV clerk's fingerprint-smudged window. While waiting in the purgatorial queue here this morning, I drifted off mentally retracing the wild road that led to this sterile office. How I went from the cartel's Top Gun to shopping for a new legal identity, so the law could never link me to that bloody, glory-filled past life. Applying for new license and registration, I told the clerk as she eyeballed me impatiently. I slid the necessary paperwork and stacks of cash under the grimy glass divider, keeping my tone even. Just moved to Los Santos from up north after a bad breakup, looking to start over fresh. She processed the information with indifference, likely numb to all manner of shady characters passing through these offices over the years. As long as the details matched and the payment cleared, what did it matter if my documents were authentic? The bureaucracy churned on despite any secrets concealed beneath the surface. I ran a hand through my freshly buzzed hair as I waited, still adjusting to my new close-cropped look. Just one part of the identity overhaul: new name, new hometown, new phone, new wardrobe. Everything scrubbed clean of connections to the notorious gangster the cartel knew as Frank West. The mystery man had worked his magic shuffling paperwork to build my alias an airtight past. As far as the straight world was concerned, Xavier Vega was just another working-class transplant, starting over in Los Santos. The board clerk finally passed me an envelope containing driver's license, registration, and plates for my newly purchased beater sedan. I was now officially reborn as Xavier. Next. I stepped aside, savoring the moment. From here, I could start rebuilding a simple, normal life without constantly watching my back. Once word got out that Frank West had perished in the Santos River, the fewer locals who connected Xavier's face to my former self, the better. I would keep my head down, take odd jobs for cash, and keep off the radars of my old criminal networks. Eventually, Xavier would simply fade into the sprawling city as just another random transplant, leading an inconspicuous existence, stacking pallets or washing dishes. Easy money and high-speed thrills were ghosts of the past. I was ready for slow, steady boring. Anything to bury Frank West for good. Outside the DMV, I decompressed with a long overdue cigarette before climbing into my newly registered clunker. Turning the key, I exhaled, seeing Xavier Vega on the ID tucked in my visor. My new clean slate in the city that created and destroyed Frank West. Whatever chaos was coming for the cartel in the wake of my death, I would watch it unfold from a safe distance. Once the inferno swallowed Alonzo and his inner circle, I could finally rest easy knowing Maria was avenged. With a new name, new car, and new outlook, I was shedding my past skin cell by cell. Where the road took Xavier Vega next didn't matter. Wherever it was, he would move through life's rhythms honest and unnoticed. No more guns, glory, or grudges weighing on his conscience. The best revenge was simply living on while the cartel's rotten empire faded into history. A new chapter began today. Chapter 16. Hiding from old contacts. I slid the apartment deadbolt closed and flipped the lights off, moving quietly through the dark studio space towards the mattress on the floor that served as my bed. Just another night disappearing into the shadows of my sparse new dwelling after finishing my warehouse gig. Keeping a low profile remained my mantra since adopting the Xavier Vega alias a few weeks back. No risk of old associates or enemies peering in on my new mundane existence. Settling onto the creaky mattress, I pulled out the old prepaid phone I reserved for checking in with my lone contact to my criminal past, the mystery man. Our operation was succeeding beyond my wildest hopes. In the wake of Frank West's demise, all suspicion had turned on Alonso. Whispers said Juan Carlos was moving to have his top lieutenant executed as a traitor. Their whole enterprise was turning on itself. Meanwhile, I kept shoveling hay and hauling freight under the radar, occasionally texting the mystery man terse logistical questions, the only threads linking Xavier the laborer to Frank the fallen cartel pioneer. Besides him, everyone from those bloody glory days presumed me dead and gone. As far as the new immigrants, struggling musicians, and aspiring actors surrounding me now, Xavier Vega was just another average guy fading into the city's sprawling fabric. A floorboard creaked outside in the hallway, faint but out of place in the building's usual nighttime silence. I slid open the nightstand drawer and gripped the pistol inside, senses heightened. Since my run-ins with the assassins, I had established a safe house rule: you don't ignore any unusual sound. Too often dismissing the subtle cues spelled disaster. I moved silently to the door, peering through the peephole. Down the dim hall, two figures stood watch outside the apartment adjacent to mine. Vague familiarity lurked in their burly, tattooed features. These were hardened vatos, clearly packing heat under their baggy shirts. My gut whispered they were cartel affiliates, maybe sentries posted to watch over a safe house or stash apartment. Somehow, in relocating, I had chosen a complex still under Santa Blanca's influence. I eased away from the door slowly, adrenaline rising as I considered my options. These gangsters were likely lower-level cronies who wouldn't recognize Xavier's face. But paranoia brewed that they were deliberately seeking Frank West, waiting for him to breach his cover. Either way, I needed to vacate this location immediately. In the faint glow of my burner phone screen, I hastily threw essentials into a duffel bag. A few changes of clothes, toiletries, ammo clips. I slipped silently towards the back of the apartment, twisting the bolt cutters I kept stashed until the chain lock snapped open. The rusty fire escape creaked slightly as I descended to the alley, glancing up for any signs of detection. Hugging the building's edge, I crept along the shadows towards my beer parked around the corner. The street was still except a few rats scurrying by the dumpsters. After quickly tossing my bag inside, I eased the car away from the complex, watching until the silhouettes of the sentries faded in the rearview mirror. It was probably just a coincidence their presence overlapped with mine, but I couldn't get sloppy. One passing glance at the wrong moment could unravel my new identity if they glimpsed any resemblance to the late Frank West. The ghost of my past still lurked close, waiting to expose me if I slipped up. Tomorrow I would start hunting a new apartment across town, further removed from old cartel territory. Some boring little haven where Xavier Vega could quietly keep his head down. No more flirting with the risk of my new unremarkable face crossing paths with anyone who might pierce the facade. It was exhausting, constantly moving in shadows, but I would shed this last remnant of my past soon enough. Once the cartel completely disintegrated, Xavier Vega could finally step into the light. Chapter 17: Investigating Santa Blanca Secrets. Housekeeping. My muffled voice echoed unanswered through the door as I slipped the key card into the slot. Inside the darkened hotel room, upscale decor sat untouched beneath a fine layer of dust. These corporate suites often sat vacant for weeks at a time, making them the perfect discreet locations for my off-the-books tasks. Whoever had last paid to occupy this room clearly hadn't lingered long. Their loss was my gain today. I'd kept busy with random motel cleaning gigs since relocating, always using cash under the table. An easy way to move unseen, blending into the invisible domestic staff while scouting for locations or information. And right now this abandoned executive suite would serve as my makeshift office, while planning the mysterious string of mishaps plaguing the cartel's operations lately. I unzipped my cleaning cart and removed the secure laptop hidden below the industrial bowels and rags. Time to log in remotely to the secure server holding all of the mystery man's intel on Santa Blanca, shipment schedules, safe house locations, client lists. Everything needed to systematically pick the cartel apart. While the laptop booted up, I gazed down at the city sprawl from the suite's bay windows. Out there beyond the glass, violent power struggles and multi-million-dollar deals daily shaped Los Santos' underworld. But up here, it all felt detached, like watching toy cars shuffle about on a rug. The mighty cartel seemed insignificant when you observed their machinations from above like a spectator. The laptop finished encrypting, and I got to work sifting through message boards and informants' reports. A pattern was emerging. Cartel businesses across the city were suddenly having very bad luck. Freak electrical fires, multiple DEA raids, entire shipments gone missing. All random low-level operators, none tied directly to Alonso or Juan Carlos. Like a ghost was haunting their entire network. I scratched my chin thoughtfully as their damage mounted, devising the next disaster to befall Santa Blanca. A nasty flu virus, perhaps, to incapacitate their couriers and distributors. I took meticulous notes covering my tracks. No need to inform the mystery man on these schemes anymore. He had served his purpose, supplying the intel. Now these final surgical blows were my hands alone covertly sabotaging the cartel. By the time they grasped what was happening, it would be too late. Their whole operation was a collapsing house of cards awaiting the fatal gust. My disposable vibrating flip phone rang, an unfamiliar downtown number flashing. I answered coldly, "Speak." The mystery man's familiar gravelly tone responded. "Our mutual friend's undoing continues apace, but his desperation is peaking. Watch your six." I frowned, unsatisfied by the vague warning. "Let desperation breed carelessness," I replied. "The only watching left is their empire crumbling." I hung up, refocusing on the laptop. Talk was cheap, even from the mystery man now. This ended with action. My planning was interrupted by the thud of the door lock disengaging. I quickly stashed the laptop back in the cart and reached for my pistol just as two men strode in wearing expensive suits and grim expressions. I recognized the taller one. Juan Carlos. Here in the flesh. They both froze at the sight of me in crisp housekeeper scrubs. I tensed but kept my face puzzled, hiding the gun behind my leg. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought this room was still vacant," I stammered nervously in my best deferential maid voice. "Let me just gather my things and get out of your way." Juan Carlos studied me carefully with dark probing eyes. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. "No need," he finally replied calmly. "The room is yours as long as required. Good help is hard to find." He never broke his stare as they brushed past me and shut themselves in the bedroom, their voices a steady murmur through the door. I hesitated, then quickly finished packing up the laptop, making sure no trace was left behind. Whatever shady business brought Juan Carlos here, I needed to get gone. But a grim satisfaction brewed in my gut. Seeing him here in the decaying flesh, while he remained oblivious to the mastermind dismantling his empire from the shadows, was sweeter than any revenge I had imagined. The mighty cartel had no clue the news waiting ahead. Their judgment day was coming fast and fierce. Chapter 18. Meeting the Mystery Man. Neon lights streaked by the taxi window, refracting off beads of rain as I gazed aimlessly at downtown Los Santos rushing past. The streets seemed unfamiliar now, viewed through a random cab's backseat instead of the tinted windows of a cartel cruiser. My days commanding these asphalt arteries were hazy memories. Tonight I was just another nobody hailing a ride across town, no witnesses aware of my past influence over this whole dangerous metropolis. "Fifth and Bront coming up, that right?" the driver grumbled, jolting me from reminiscing. I nodded as he veered across lanes. Before I could pay the fare, he spoke again. "Stick around a few minutes, yeah, boss wants a quick word." He thumbed over his shoulder at a taxi sign blowing faintly through the downpour. I recognized the company name well, though I had never met its mysterious leader face to face. No time like tonight to formally introduce myself at last to the mystery man. Inside his understated downtown office, he regarded me through a haze of cigarette smoke from across a paper-strewn desk. His face was obscured by a ball cap and high collar, revealing only rough features and dark probing eyes that appeared strangely familiar. Wordlessly, he slid a newspaper over. The front page bore a photo of police raiding a cartel safe house beneath the headline "Major Blow to Santa Blanca Network." I couldn't help but smirk as I sat across from the mystery man. "I see our collaboration continues paying dividends." He nodded, taking a long drag before responding. "Indeed, though the beast is at its most dangerous when cornered, how does it feel, witnessing your former masters grovel before death's door?" I pondered the question, struggling to define my swirling emotions, now that the cartel's collapse was imminent. Satisfaction at avenging Maria? Pride at outsmarting Juan Carlos? or just weary emptiness, the closure I had sought still leaving a lingering hollowness within. Justice is closer than ever, I replied calmly, uncertain if that captured my state of mind. We stay vigilant until their legacy is reduced to ashes. The mystery man chuckled. Spoken like a true enlightened phoenix, rising renewed while the false idols of your past burn away. He leaned back, eyeing me with newfound respect. Our alliance may be concluding, but I sense your rebirth has only just begun. Fear and hatred die quickly. What future might you build without them? I sat silently as his words washed over me. What did await in this unfamiliar new chapter, free from the bloody vengeance that had fueled me? I'd been so focused on destroying the cartel, my own path beyond remained uncharted. After a long pause, I extended my hand, looking the mystery man directly in his shadowed eyes. The future is uncertain, but the present calls. It has been an honor. I hope the gesture conveyed my gratitude for his help dismantling my former bosses. He clasped my hand firmly. Likewise, fortune favors you, Frank West. Hearing my old name spoken aloud sent a shiver down my spine. That man died the night I plunged into the river. But the mystery man using it now felt like a knowing wing, hinting our secret partnership would persist long after the cartel faded into memory. Outside, I hailed another of his cabs, watching his office shrink into the hazy nighttime horizon. He was right about one thing: with vengeance nearly fulfilled, only optimism remained to drive me forward. The mystery man had been indispensable, but our alliance served its purpose. Whatever came next, I had to chart my own path beyond simply destroying my old demons. Blank pages waited ahead. Chapter 19. Taxi company jobs begin. Need a ride downtown, yeah? Hoppin', mate, I got you covered. The cabbie's broad Aussie accent always made me chuckle as I slid into the back seat. My old friend Oscar had proven a valuable asset since officially joining the mystery man's company. Always ready to shuttle me around inconspicuously while feeding me intel gathered from his passengers' loose lips. And his casual swagger kept rides feeling low-key even while planning crucial cartel disruption schemes. We pulled into afternoon traffic, one of 1,000 taxicabs phasing through the city's arteries. Figured you could use a lift to scout that new hidden stakeout spot downtown, Oscar said over his shoulder. Other bosses got eyes on popular routes there, easy to observe unseen. I nodded approvingly. Good man, that locale will be useful very soon. Our praise desperation is peaking. I passed him a thick envelope of cash, his standard payment for smooth transport and useful tips. Getting intimately familiar with the cartel's movements and vulnerabilities throughout Los Santos would prove key in these final decisive weeks. Oscar grinned as he thumbed through the bills. Too right, mate. Word is the top dogs are proper panicking lately. Pressure's cracking them from the inside out. I rested my head back, watching the cityscape shuffle by as we drove. When this was all over, the work continuing Oscar's daily routine would seem mundane compared to our secret crusade bringing down the cartel's empire. But every piece of intel helped tighten the vice, increasing errors that accelerated their inevitable collapse. And Oscar had come through time and again, loyal to the cause and ready for any request. Glad to have him watching my back, even as this bloody chapter neared its closing pages. We wound our way downtown through the midday traffic, eventually pulling up a few blocks from the inconspicuous office building I planned to covertly observe. Before I exited, I passed Oscar a burner phone. Use this for any urgent developments. The finale approaches, but timing is everything. Don't hesitate to contact me. Roger that, boss. I'll ring straight away if anything big starts brewing. Oscar tucked the phone away and flashed a peace sign as I stepped onto the bustling sidewalk outside. I kept my head down, blending into the crowds, just another faceless pedestrian. The spying spot was a short walk, then hours of patiently watching and listening from the shadows. Letting the cartel players condemn themselves with their own sloppy arrogance and mounting fear. The fat lady was warming up to sing their swan song. Night fell slowly as I stood sentinel, peering between blinds at the mundane comings and goings within the building. As tempting as it was to storm their sanctums with guns blazing, I knew now patience and precision would be my ultimate weapons, allowing them just enough rope to hang themselves. No more chasing action, death awaited on my terms. Oscar's burner phone rang, lighting up from an unfamiliar number. I answered coldly, listening to the distorted voice on the other end. Then, without a word, slipped away downstairs and exited casually onto the dark, empty side street. A nondescript sedan pulled up and I stepped inside. "It's done?" I asked the mystery man sitting beside me as we cruised through dimly lit roads I didn't recognize. His face remained obscured by his hat and collar. "Exactly as you requested, precisely on schedule," he rasped, barely loud enough over the engine's hum. "Chaos will ensue gradually. Our hands will remain invisible." I nodded, staring straight ahead into the night. The first domino had toppled, triggering the cascade. No satisfaction or remorse stirred within me now that our plans were in motion. Only a chilling sense of calm and acceptance, like gazing upon the tide retreating slowly, but irrevocably, before a towering wave. The currents of change were churning, destiny's grip inexorable. All that remained was bearing witness, as the waters rose to swallow the past. Chapter 20. Revenge Opportunities Arise. Tires screeched around the corner behind me as I sprinted breathlessly through the maze of alleys and side streets. My pursuers were close, their shouts echoing between close-set buildings. I just needed to make it a few more blocks to where my getaway car idled discreetly down a back road. But my legs were heavy, still sore from this morning's cargo haul up and down loading ramps and storage bays. Had to keep pushing, and getting cornered alone tonight would surely end in a hail of bullets. I hung a sharp right, vaulting a chain-link fence into the rear parking of a raucous club. The heavy bass booming inside masked my footsteps as I slipped through parked cars, then rolled under a closing electric gate, back out to the adjacent street. No glimpses yet of my tail behind me. I slowed to a brisk walk, catching my breath so as not to attract attention on the more crowded main road. This month had brought increased run-ins with cartel cronies and assassins lurking the alleys near my sparse apartment. Despite keeping a low profile, my identity seemed dangerously close to being compromised now that Santa Blanca's collapse was accelerating. I constantly had one eye over my shoulder, while focusing the other on how to best capitalize on their disarray as their reckoning approached. Maybe tonight's encounter was my opportunity to finally seize open vengeance. Up ahead, a familiar candy apple red Buick Electra sat idling by the curb. Alonso, still clinging to old habits and routines even with his empire crumbling all around him. I pulled the pistol from under my jacket, moving silently up the sidewalk towards the driver's side window. After all these years, the vengeful thrill of having that bastard's life in my hands again brought fresh adrenaline pumping through my veins. One clean shot was all it would take this time. I was steps away with a clear angle when the Buick's back door opened and a small child stepped out clutching a stuffed bear, likely no older than Maria, when we lost our parents. My heart wrenched at her resemblance. Alonzo leaned over and ruffled her hair affectionately before pulling away from the curb, the little girl waving goodbye. I lowered the pistol as their taillights disappeared into the night. Avenging Maria had motivated my war against the cartel all these years. But sacrificing this innocent girl's father, however vile, would only pass the pain forward. My mission was never to become the same monsters I fought. They would still face justice soon, but certain lines could not be crossed if there was any hope of healing old wounds someday. Further down the block, I spotted two suited men loitering conspicuously in front of a corner store, likely waiting on Alonso for pickup. The heavy ink visible on their necks, even at a distance, betrayed their affiliation. I pressed onward, gun now tucked away. There were still mouths that needed silencing tonight. But the cycle of vengeance called for more dignified deaths, not the savage gutting my darkest instincts craved. As long as light remained to guide me from the abyss, hope persisted I might one day emerge from the long shadow cast over my soul. And if salvation lay ahead, it began with mercy where I might instead inflict mortal pain. My sister's memory deserved that much. The beast I had become still crouched inside, ready to unleash hell. But I had to believe a better path awaited beyond the bloodshed once this last battle was finally won. Chapter 21. A Final Job. Framed Heist. Tires screeched around the corner as I weaved the stolen sedan through the narrow alleys of Los Carnales, my pulse racing. Ever since the assassins had found me upstate, I knew my next play had to be bold to get the cartel off my scent. I was going to hit Alonso's crew in their own backyard to send a message. Their enemies were everywhere, even right under their noses. Checking the mirror, I glimpsed the chrome grille of Alonso's dubstep gaining on me. His boys must have spotted me lurking near their warehouse hangout and given chase. I just needed to lure them somewhere I had the advantage. Up ahead, a side alley forked off towards Del Rey Road, one of the main drags through Carnell's territory. I took the turn sharply, fishtailing onto Del Rey where I knew a rival gang controlled the block. As I hoped, two armed young vatos stood posted up outside the laundromat on the corner. I slowed the sedan as I passed them and shouted out the open window, "Alonso's crew is coming around the corner, lit their asses up." Before they could react, I hit the gas, rounding the next corner as the sounds of shouts and gunfire erupted behind me. If the rivals didn't take down Alonso's boys, they would at least slow them down. I ditched the stolen car a few blocks away and slipped unseen through side streets on foot. The afternoon crowds choking the sidewalks paid me little mind, too caught up hustling to their own business. In my street clothes, I was just another face blending into the Los Santos sprawl. As I peered out from an alley, a familiar pink and black Buick Electra cruising by made my breath catch in my throat. Alonso himself driving solo, likely out searching for the sedan I had abandoned. I reached for the pistol tucked in my waistband. This was my chance to take him down face to face. Stepping into the street as the Buick approached, I raised my weapon at its tinted windows. People on the sidewalk screamed, scrambling for cover as I unloaded round after round into the driver's side. The Buick swerved and collided with a parked vehicle, the windows shattered and smoke spewing from the riddled chassis. Alonso had to be dead or dying inside. I moved in cautiously for the execution shot. Suddenly, burning pain exploded across my left shoulder, and I crumpled to the asphalt. One of Alonso's henchmen behind me had landed a shot. Out of instinct, I squeezed off 2 quick rounds in his direction, not waiting to see if they met their mark before I scrambled behind a dumpster. I clutched my gushing wound to slow the bleeding, cursing through gritted teeth. The Buick's driver door hung open now. Alonso must have bailed once the bullets started flying. I'd failed to take him down. Sirens wailed in the distance, closing in fast. With my injury, taking on the cops head-on would be suicide. The alley offered my only route of escape. Their shouting voices faded into the distance as I limped into a maintenance shed and collapsed behind piles of equipment and gardening tools. For now I was clear, but wounded badly. As I tore my shirt to bandage the oozing shoulder hole, my head spun with defeat. I had risked it all to put Alonso in the dirt, but he had slipped the noose again while his men nearly put me in my own grave. even with the element of surprise. Taking down the cartel from the inside was proving nearly impossible. I needed further outside help if I wanted to end this war on my terms. Wincing through searing pain, I wrapped up my shoulder as best I could manage and lumbered back to my beater car waiting a few blocks over. As I drove off, I replayed the Bosch confrontation in my mind. What if I had fired on Alonso seconds earlier, or been a better shot to his henchman that blindsided me? Wondering about the what-ifs would torture me, but I had to shake it off. The time for risky direct assaults was over. Now I needed the mystery man's web to deliver my vengeance quietly and cleverly. With him as my invisible partner, we would topple Alonso's empire without him ever seeing the betrayal coming or knowing who ultimately pulled the trigger. Chapter 22: Confronting Alonso's Showdown. This was it. The final play to bring down the cartel empire that took everything from me. Thanks to months of strategically leaked data, key raids, and sabotaging their distribution chains, Santa Blanca teetered on the brink of collapse. Juan Carlos and his top cronies were all gathered today for an emergency meeting, desperate to stop the bleeding. And Alonso would be among them, still unaware his most ruthless enforcer, Frank West, had orchestrated it all. The time had come to finally watch his world crumble before his eyes. I sat parked down the block from their high-rise gathering spot, watching the building entrance from behind tinted windows. No army of bodyguards or assassins could save Alonso now from the implosion I had engineered through countless covert chess moves. Whatever security they scrambled to assemble was mere empty theater, powerless to shield them from the inexorable fate awaiting inside those corporate walls. At last a line of sleek SUVs arrived, Santa Blanca's elite fiercely clutching their facade of control even as ruin closed in. Through my camera lens I recognized Alonso's profile as he stepped onto the sidewalk flanked by Juan Carlos' personal guard. His smug expression churned my stomach. He had no comprehension of the butcher's table about to collapse beneath his feet. I observed silently as they filed into the building, projections of strength and stability. Shadows on the cave wall, oblivious to the light creeping close to reveal their impotence. After today, the cartel's iron grip on Los Santos would be irrevocably shattered, their followers left wandering leaderless when the mighty praise they sang proved empty lies. Watching those doors close behind Alonso and his partners in brutality, I finally felt the satisfaction that had eluded me upon leaving the life initially. A profound calm washed over me, vengeance fulfilled without bloodying my own hands this time. Their ruin would be built from their own sins. My long chapter with the cartel was finally closed for good. As I drove away, I called in an anonymous tip to the local FBI field office about criminal activity at the downtown high-rise. Within hours, every Santa Blanca leader in one spot would be indicted or apprehended thanks to the bounty of evidence I had funneled law enforcement over months. Alonso would finally understand who orchestrated his downfall too late. And just like that, it was over. No gunfire or police chase was needed. Only patience to strategically dismantle the rotting pillars of the cartel from within until the whole structure collapsed on itself. They never saw me coming. Now the law could handle mopping up whatever loyal remnants survived this decapitation. I drove out of the city as radio chatter reported a major organized crime sting unfolding downtown. I didn't look back. That chapter was closed for good now. Ahead lay the open road, destination unknown. But for the first time in years, my direction didn't matter. Wherever the road took me, there was no one left to fear, fight or flee. I was simply free. The future stretched open before me, exactly as I wanted it. The end.